Two Steelers were named to the offensive rookie team of NFL.com to be predicted for the 2022 season. We'll talk about that, who they are, and how the Steelers receivers are going to fit into the offense, where they're going to finish this year, as well as who fills out the bottom of that depth chart. It's going to be a lot of talk about the Steelers offense today and the young players of it right here in the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter, with Wes Euler of Steeler Nation Radio. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Steelers, your daily Pittsburgh Steelers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome to the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter, bringing you your daily dose of all things on the Pittsburgh Steelers. As always, you can find this show on Apple, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Odyssey, and YouTube. If you're watching this video on YouTube, hit the like button on this video. If you like it, hit the subscribe button to our YouTube channel to get all of our daily Monday through Friday episodes, as well as our bonus content, including we have breaking news updates right here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. We thank you for making the Locked On Steelers podcast your first listen every day. Joining me today, as I said earlier, Wes Euler of Steeler Nation Radio. You know him, you love him. He's got the hair in full flowing action tonight.
Oh, baby.
Watching here on YouTube. Wes, how you doing?
What's up, partner? I'm doing well. My wife and I are leaving at the end of this week to go spend some time with her family over the 4th and everything. Little long weekend and, with her side of the family and everything. So this week's going to drag a little bit. But always nice to catch up with you to help kill some time in the meantime.
I appreciate you taking that time, and you get to take the baby along with you. So
yeah,
it's always
it'll be
great
fun
when babies get to hang out with the rest of the family. But I wanted to talk to you about the Steelers babies, and that being the rookies.
I see what you did there.
Yeah, transitions, baby. There
very
we
nice,
go.
Very nice.
Segues. But in all seriousness, I wanted to refer to an article written by Chad Reuter of a draft analyst for NFL.com, and it was talking about the offensive all rookie team for 2022, and they predicted two Steelers rookies to make this list in the offense. Those, of course, being Kenny Pickett and George Pickens, the Steelers' first two picks of this NFL draft class. Now, I get Pickens. He's a dark horse for a lot of people. Not even a dark horse. He's a prominent horse. He's a favorite for a lot of people. Matt Williamson on Steeler Nation Radio has talked a lot about him being the guy that could take over. There's a lot of people that think that he could become the best receiver of this NFL draft class that just came out. But I think it's intriguing that they put Kenny Pickett up there at the quarterback spot, because I get it. He's the first quarterback off the board. No other quarterback was taken until day 2 of the NFL draft that year. Malik Willis went off way later than anyone expected him to heading into the first draft night. So I guess first, before we get into the wide receiver talk, is Kenny Pickett just there as a placeholder because we might not see our rookie quarterback get any start this year?
It was funny. When I first saw that too, my immediate reaction was, okay, are we missing something here in Pittsburgh? Like we've been so convinced that it's going to be Mitch to start the year and that,
right,
he's got a good chance to hold on to that job for a while unless things really go south. Are we just so dialed in on Mitch Trubisky that maybe we're missing the forest through the trees type thing? Like, does the national media have some scoop that we've all missed here in Western Pennsylvania, right? But then I immediately went to where you just went. Well, wait a second. One, you said it. He's the only quarterback taken in the first round. I mean, it's a far cry from what, 2018, when there were 5 quarterbacks taken in the first round. Last year, when there were 5 quarterbacks taken in the top 15 of the draft, every 3 picks was a quarterback to start the first round of the draft, ending with Mac Jones at 15. It is a far cry from that. So I lean towards the latter maybe a little bit more, just because, again, as you think it out, Malik Willis, he's sitting behind Ryan Tannehill. Desmond Ridder, okay, maybe he's going to have an opportunity, but it doesn't sound like he's going to be the guy week 1 as well, too. Kenny Pickett could play, let's say, 5 or 6 games, Chris, and he could have by far and away the most, reps, the most snaps, the most action of any of the rookie quarterbacks. This could be a very weird year in that regard. I mean, right? Normally,
you talk about that Pitt man while you were over there.
Normally, again, you've got at least usually what, 3 quarterbacks taken in the first round, sometimes 4 or 5.
Right.
And there's a lot to really sink your teeth into there. I mean, this year it was Kenny Pickett, and then it was a whole lot of waiting. And
It was.
so, yeah, as I started to kind of think about that a little bit more, maybe it feels like, no, we're not all missing the point, not all missing the plot with Mitch Trubisky. That maybe just, my goodness, my hair is out of control. Sorry, I can't. I'm doing this YouTube thing here. That maybe, Kenny Pickett, even if he plays half the season, even if he plays a third or a fourth of the season, that could still be by far and away enough for him to be the most impressive rookie quarterback.
My thing is, Wes, it might not take him playing a third or a fourth. It might be a game or two, because injuries happen, and Mitch Trubisky is a more mobile quarterback than the Steelers have had for several years. He could take a big hit and need a day off or a week off or a week or two off, and that gets Kenny Pickett his starts. He might buy. I'm just looking at how this class works out. I don't see any other quarterback just being thrown into a starting situation to get that much opportunity and succeeding.
Right.
And my thinking is, maybe Kenny gets a game or two to play, and he has Najee Harris, Deontay Johnson, Chase Claypool, George Pickens, Pat Freiermuth. All these guys are working, and Kenny Pickett feeds off of that. And then you're like, wow, it may not be, it's not going to be some, passer rating of 158.3 and all this crazy stuff, but you see a competent quarterback as a rookie, and people are going to say, yeah, that's the guy. In a few years, he's going to be the best. And like, you see people rush to get on that bandwagon. I think that's how he makes the all-rookie team, is that he's the only quarterback of this class that gets the chance to do just that.
He's the only one that shows the promise and potential this season. And not saying that Malik Willis doesn't have it or Desmond Ridder doesn't have it.
No slight to them at all.
I mean, again, think about it. If you're Malik Willis right now, if everything goes well in Tennessee and Ryan Tannehill stays healthy, and I mean, this is a team in the Titans that was the top seed in the AFC last year, and they win double-digit games, you're not going to see Malik Willis. Even with Desmond Ridder, they're not going to throw him out there right away. They're going to be patient with him. They're going to take their time. That's a whole rebuilding process down there. So, yeah, you know what? The more and more we kind of talk this out, it almost seems like a no-brainer that Kenny Pickett is going to be the all, our first team all rookie quarterback or all rookie offense team, whatever the exact label is. Because you're right, it might only take 2 games, it might only take 3 games, and that could be it. It's gonna be a weird quarterback year for rookies, man. Like it is very bizarre as we talk this out, and then the next step of this, right, is like, okay, well, how does this play to offensive rookie of the year? Because that award, 80% of the time, is a quarterback. Like 8 out of 10 years, that's a quarterback. What if Kenny Pickett's the only quarterback that gets any spin and it's only 3 games? All right, well, all of a sudden, does it go to a running back? Does it go to an offensive lineman? Does it go to, God forbid, a defensive player? Well, that couldn't happen for offensive rookie of the year. Sorry, I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself.
It's okay.
But it's late night as we record this. And my hair's just all over the place. And I'm rattled right now, Mr. Carter. And I'm saying nice things about a pit man. I mean, geez, Louise, you got my head spinning here. Yeah, it's, what I think, the more it makes a lot of sense. When I first saw it, again, my initial reaction was, all right, like, are we missing something? What's going on with this Mitch Trubisky thing that we're all seemingly so sure of, and this kind of plan that the Steelers have? But yeah, there's I think, going to be no doubt that Kenny Pickett, unless Mitch Trubisky plays all 17 games, I think he's going to be the rookie quarterback that ends up with the most the most tape at the end of the season, the most experience, the most reps, all that stuff.
I think it certainly could be that being the case for the year. Again, we're both projecting Mitch Trubisky to be the starter for most of the season. It's just the odds that he gets a chance this year, and a chance. And I think, again, the big thing is that the Steelers have put weapons around him. A lot of these other rookie quarterbacks are going to be in situations where they're going to be figuring things out late into the fact. They're not going to have defenses that have as much talent to keep giving them the ball back. They're going to have to play a little bit desperate at times. And I think the way the Steelers are going to play this year, they're not going to. I don't think the Steelers will too often have their quarterback in desperate situations this year where they're going to be down by big score deficits and have to start slinging the ball the way they used to with Ben Roethlisberger. It's just not where I see the Steelers being this year. But the other factor of this, of course, is George Pickens. And when I look at George Pickens, there's a lot of people that, again, there were 6 wide receivers that went in the first round of the NFL draft this year. And he wasn't even one of them. But there's a lot of people now that are saying, oh, wait a second. He could be
the dude.
He could be that dude. And he was also on this list. And in fact, he was the first receiver on this list to make all rookie. I want to talk to Wes about what it would take for George Pickens to do that and compare that to the rest of the Steelers wide receiver depth chart. We're going to do that in just a second here. But first, I got to talk to you guys about BetOnline.net. BetOnline.net is your number one source for all your betting stats and sports information. You can find all the latest sports developments, league reviews, and news. And we know that now Stanley Cup Finals are over. Hey, Wes, before we get into the other games that they played, were the Lightning too whiny at the end of that series?
Oh, totally. Especially for a team that just won 2 Stanley Cups. I mean, Come on.
Exactly.
Let's not act like last year when they eliminated the New York Islanders in the Eastern Conference Final that they didn't have 7 men on the ice when they scored the game-winning goal. All right? It's sports. Quit whining. 99.9% of the time, the better team wins.
Exactly. And the Avalanche definitely were the better team in that series. But I get that there were some complaints that you could say by the rules. But, hey, like you said, that team won 2 in a row. But, hey, when it comes to BetOnline.net, hockey's done. Baseball, it's going to be where it's at until we get football season back. But they're going to help you with all your odds, all your information, all your things that are going to be changing from day to day. Baseball's a fast moving sport when it comes to how many games actually get played every day. So the best place to keep track of everyday games and what bets you can make money off of in the sport of baseball while you wait for football to come back is BetOnline.net, which is your continued source for all your sports wagering information from live betting to playoffs, esports, and more. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends in the action when you visit BetOnline, where the game starts. Back here on the Locked On Locked On Steelers podcast, I'm Chris Carter. He's Wes Euler. Wes, here's what I propose to you before we get deeper into the George Pickens and the Steelers wide receiver conversation. You mentioned how normally the NFL Offensive Rookie of the Year is a quarterback. It's a Trevor Lawrence. It's a Joe Burrow. It's a whoever's the quarterback of that rookie season. If no quarterback actually plays for most of the season, it most likely won't be one. So then you go to, does a team, does another position get it? There's Chris Olave, there's Garrett Wilson, there's those guys.
Yep.
But according to this list, again, NFL.com, draft analyst Chad Reuter, the top receiver he listed was George Pickens.
Interesting.
What if it's George Pickens who puts himself in for NFL Offensive Rookie of the Year consideration because he's the most explosive rookie wide receiver and there's no quarterback that takes over. There's some good running backs, but maybe they don't put up stellar numbers. But maybe I'm not saying Jamar Chase type of a year from last year, but
sure. That would be historic.
That mean first of all, to have it one time with Jamar Chase was crazy. To have it back-to-back years, then I think a lot of people were talking about.
Well, you had with Justin Jefferson and then Jamar Chase.
I forgot about Justin Jefferson.
It'd be like 3 years in a row of breaking records.
It would be insane. So I look at this opportunity and I think I don't think it's crazy to think that George Pickens could put himself in that conversation because there's no quarterback that stands out as the guy that's going to take over for an offense so long as Kenny Pickett doesn't just outright win the starting job from Mitch Trubisky. Am I crazy for thinking so there?
I don't think you're crazy. I would say the one thing working, and you know what, I like this. And in fact, you know what, forget one of these nights I'm going to have to take a night off from betting O'Neal Cruz home runs, all right? And I'm just going to have to put some futures because I bet you the odds for Pickens to win Offensive Rookie of the Year are probably pretty long. I mean, you could probably get some a $5 holler or a $10 chuck on that would probably get you a pretty nice return. I don't think you're crazy. The only thing, though, that really holds it up for me is what if – okay, let's go best case scenario, right? Mitch Trubisky and Pickens, they've got chemistry right away, because if it ends up being Pickett and Pickens, I think we both agree that the award would go to the quarterback, because that's just, again, that's how this works. So let's say Mitch Trubisky has a good year for the Steelers. The team doesn't light the world on fire, but they win 10 or 11 games and make the playoffs, and Pickens is a very productive part of that offense. If that's all the case, I'm thinking that Diontae Johnson and Chase Claypool probably had good years too. And so I don't know how much is going to be left there for Pickens to go crazy like that, if that makes sense. Because if he's having a type of year where he's going to win Offensive Rookie of the Year, clearly the offense did some damage. Is he going to be able to surpass one of those two? Does, not knock on wood, not to speak this into existence, but, is it maybe an injury to Diontae or Claypool or something like that opens the door for Pickens to have a huge year? So no, so getting back to your question, I don't think you're crazy. But I do think even if he has a really productive year, it just might be difficult for him to get the pure volume that some of the other receivers are going to get, since he will have Chase Claypool and Diontae Johnson. And as you mentioned, Pat Freiermuth, a lot of other viable candidates kind of, looking for the football there as well, too.
I do agree. I think that might be his biggest obstacle, is that there's a lot of young talent also on the Steelers offensive roster looking to prove themselves. But to your point about being the bet, right now, the odds that I'm seeing right now for George Pickens to be NFL Offensive Rookie of the Year is plus 4,000, which means if you put down $100 bet for George Pickens to win NFL Offensive Rookie of the Year, again, you could be just a crazy Steelers fan, but that's a bet that I'd be like, if I lost $100 on that, I lost $100 on that.
You're getting 4 stacks back if the dude wins the thing.
Stacks if you hit it. And here's the other thing. Now, again, looking at other guys that could win this, there's a lot of other guys. Drake London, the first wide receiver off the board.
It's a good one.
Treylon Burks could be in that conversation. Christian Watson, Garrett Wilson, Kenneth Walker, Chris Olave, Sky Moore, who went to the Chiefs. There's
do they have any offensive linemen high on that list or no?
They actually don't. I'm looking at this list now.
Because a couple years ago, Tristan Wirfs could have very easily won.
Oh yes, absolutely.
And I wonder if maybe we could potentially have another situation like that.
But I think that's the problem, is that offensive linemen just rarely get that kind of respect. And maybe this is the year that it happens. Maybe they say, well, there's no quarterback and there's too many receivers. Maybe we go with an offensive lineman, because, again, this was an interesting offensive line group to be in that to look at. I mean, this was a group that was picked at very quickly, but Jahan Dotson's out there. He's another receiver that would be in that conversation. But again, who's throwing him the ball in Washington? And I guess the same thing goes for Jameson Williams with the Lions. But this is why I brought this up, Wes. I thought, George Pickens, let's say he has a better year. And this is my next question to you. Where does he finish in receiving yards for the Steelers? And that includes tight ends, running backs, everybody. Does he finish first, second, third, fourth, fifth, anywhere like that? Because I think that determines a lot of this too. Is how quickly do you see George Pickens rise up the receiving, priority list for the Pittsburgh Steelers?
I could see second. I could see him being the number 2 guy. Mm-hmm. I in that regard though, I'm not casting aside Diontae Johnson. The guy who had
separation skills will make him a target for any quarterback, whether it's Trubisky, Pickett, or even Rudolph. If that happens,
we've got to play the Ben sounder here. All right, this is a 2021 comment alone.
Yeah,
but Diontae Johnson did not have the best quarterback play last year, and we realize in the minutia, in the details, there's a lot of things from last year that I'm using air quotes here if you're watching on YouTube that bug us, that we want Diontae to clean up still. Mm-hmm. But when you look at that offense and how much they struggled to score and move the football and what that passing attack was, to have over 1,100 yards is a pretty darn good season for Diontae Johnson.
10th in the NFL in yards.
To finish top 10 in the NFL is pretty darn good. I gotta think. I mean, that's the floor for him, and he is going to hopefully have a much more productive run game for the Steelers. Some more guys around him to take attention off of him. And, he's in that contract year and is singing for his supper in terms of his big NFL payday. I think Diontae Johnson is going to be, both eyeball-wise and when we look statistically at the end of the season, the clear-cut number 1 wide receiver for the Steelers. But if Pickens ends up being the number 2 guy, not far off from him and has better numbers than Claypool, has better numbers than Pat Freiermuth, that wouldn't shock me. It certainly would not. I think he's capable, and I think he's going to have a real opportunity to carve out a role in this, this new era of a young Steelers offense.
I think that's a very big possibility and something that I think could change the dynamics of how this whole thing goes. Because here's the other thing. If he finishes number 2 in receiving yards for the Pittsburgh Steelers, I'm not saying that the Steelers get 2,000-yard receivers, but that can still be a good thing to have, especially if he's a touchdowns guy. This is a guy who made a lot of catches away from his body, highlight type of plays. If he becomes that kind of guy for the Steelers to make those type of big plays, I think that puts him in this NFL offensive rookie of the year conversation. Again, the odds I'm looking at right here, plus 4,000 for him.
Chris,
right
$10 bet would win you $400 back.
Exactly. And that's
and
again, for a reasonable bet, because I guarantee you there are reasonable NFL bettors who, even without those odds, are like, I like the idea of a George Pickens having a shot at it this year because there's no quarterback that's going to scream off the scales for you, and there is going to be a bunch of receivers, but this is going to be a guy on a young offense with a lot of other young talent, and maybe he can emerge to become the young leading talent of the offense. So we'll see how all that plays out. But we've talked a lot about the top of the depth chart. Diontae Johnson, Chase Claypool calling himself a top 3 receiver. Kinda, not actually. He just kind of said like he wants to be a top 3 receiver. I covered that in an episode a week or 2 ago. But also George Pickens. I want to talk to you about the bottom receivers because I do think it's important how the Steelers field the wide receiver, how they fill it on their roster, and then how they take it in game by game. That's going to be our next topic here, and who makes the bottom of that depth chart right here in the Locked On Steelers podcast. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. Back here on the Locked On Steelers podcast, I'm Chris Carter. He's Wes Euler. We're talking a lot about the Steelers offense right now, especially that receiver position. Now, we talked about George Pickens maybe being a NFL Offensive Rookie of the Year dark horse and being a bet that maybe all of you need to make. Again, go to betonline.net to get all your specifics and before you make your bet. But I look at this wide receiver room, and we've talked a lot about Chase Claypool, Diontae Johnson, George Pickens, but who makes out the bottom of this wide receiver room, Wes? Because years ago, it used to be common for the Steelers to take 5 wide receivers all the time. That was it. Just don't ask questions. They were just going to take 5 wide receivers at the game. Then in 2016, Martavis Bryant got suspended for a year. Marcus Wheaton had a season-ending injury. Sammy Coates had broken hands. And then all of a sudden, you're down to Eli Rogers, Kobe Hamilton, Marcus Ayers. Like, you're just in a rough spot receiver-wise to work with, even behind Antonio Brown at his most Antonio Brownness.
Mm-hmm.
That's a lot to take.
Yeah.
That's a lot to have to deal with. And in response, the Steelers said, we're going to take 6 wide receivers. We're just going to be loaded up at the position. We're not going to want to put up with this. And I feel like that's the kind of spirit that they're at right now, because they don't want to be in that position again with wide receiver. And maybe they take six guys into the season. But I wanted to ask you, as one, do they take 5 guys? Do they take 6 guys in? And if you're presuming Pickens, Claypool, and of course
Diontae Johnson. I think Calvin Austin too, being a 4th round pick.
That was the thing. I wrote an article about this over the weekend for SteelersNow.com. Go check it out. I said Gunnar Olszewski was my favorite to make that 5th spot and fill out the bottom of it there. But one, do you think the Steelers actually go for the move and taking 6 receivers in with them to the season? And 2, who are those 5th and 6th receivers? If you go with
so I like this actually. We all know the big 3 are going to be Diontae Johnson, Chase Claypool, and George Pickens. I think Gunnar Olszewski is penciled into that number 5 spot because of his prowess as a return guy. If you've got a break glass in case of emergency and use him at wide receiver a little bit, wouldn't be a disaster. Wouldn't be ideal, but wouldn't be a disaster either.
Mm-hmm.
I think your top 3, Diontae 1, and then whatever order Claypool and Pickens shake out is 2 and 3. Gunnar 5. Okay, that to me, then I slide Calvin Austin there as one of the, like, he's got to be 4 or 6.
Right.
He can't be out of the equation. He's not a 6th round pick. He's not a 7th round pick.
He's a 4th.
We've seen those guys not make the team as rookies occasionally. If you draft a guy in the 4th round and he doesn't make the team as a rookie, you are publicly admitting we effed up that pick. I mean, There's no other way to pick. It's a 4th round pick. It's not a 1st round pick, but it's also not a 7th round pick. So I think how it shakes out, Chris, is like I said, those guys are penciled in 1, 2, 3, and 5. And then to me, I would think Calvin Austin is your 4th, and you try and keep Anthony Miller as your 6th and stash him on the practice squad or that type of thing, do what you have to do. But I keep coming back to Anthony Miller, man. He's the real X factor. He's the real wild card for me. This is a guy that caught 7 touchdown passes for Mitch Trubisky his rookie year. 7.
This is true.
And then came back the next year and had over 50 receptions and I think like almost 700 yards. So he hasn't lit the league on fire, but he also had 3 years with Mitch Trubisky where I think he scored like 12 touchdowns, had a little over 1,000 yards. He was a capable wide receiver. Like I said, 7 touchdowns with Mitch his rookie year. To me, how much do they believe in Anthony Miller? What's he able to do in camp and preseason? And is there, something there with Mitch Trubisky? For those reasons, I think he at least belongs in the room, in the conversation. And if it ends up being 6, even if it's only 5 active on game day and you try and stash 1, I think Anthony Miller's that dude.
So here's the name that we haven't mentioned yet. Does that mean Myles Boykin is just sent packing? Because I agree with you. Anthony Miller is an interesting prospect. And Gunnar Olszewski is my favorite. But when it comes to these players, Myles Boykin has the build of a Chase Claypool.
He's certainly
also
does.
A former teammate of Chase Claypool at Notre Dame. Do you pass up on that?
That's a great point. And you know what? I'm going to be completely transparent with you here, Chris, and with our Locked On Steelers audience. All right, so go ahead and roast me. I completely forgot about Myles Boykin. Completely forgot about him until about 30 seconds ago. We talked about him at OTAs. We have had all these conversations, and then boom, I just blanked here as we record this late on a Monday evening. Yeah, he's absolutely in the conversation. So that's 7 guys now. And again, I don't think Calvin Austin's going anywhere. You don't do that with 4th round picks, man. And I think Gunnar Olszewski has that 5th spot penciled in. I mean, this was a guy who just a couple years ago was first team All-Pro returner. I mean, he's got real prowess at that position. And like I said, if you've got to use him a little bit at wide receiver in case of some injuries and some things like that, it's not the end of the world. So then all of a sudden, you could have you got 2 dogs, 1 bone type situation.
Yep.
Is it Myles Boykin, who, like you said, man, he's got a lot of the stuff you can't coach, just some of the size and just the raw athletic ability and the speed. He's got pedigree. He knows the division well.
He's played in the AFC North.
Played in the AFC North. Yeah, know what? We've talked a lot about these different competitions at training camp. You and I believe, last week here on Locked On, we talked about the defensive line now with Ogunjobi and how all that playing time and competition shake out. Maybe that last wide receiver spot is one of these that we need to add to the list because I think Anthony Miller and Myles Boykin are both capable, certainly. You're probably only going to be able to keep one. If you end up able to stash one of those guys on practice squad back and forth, okay. Realistically, you're not going to be able to do that with both guys. Someone's going to nab one of those guys at some point. That feels like the classic Mike Tomlin 2 dogs, 1 bone scenario.
But again, it's better to have 2 dogs and 1 bone scenarios than to 100%. Not, because then those dogs are going to fight over that bone, and you're going to learn.
Have no dogs in 1 bone.
Right. No dogs in 1 bone would be stupid. But again, you look at that situation, and Mike Tomlin's going to say whoever comes out of that is going to be better for coming out of that.
100%.
Because they'll have had to work for it. And that builds the respect, and that builds more trust, and the Steelers go from there. So I'm right with you. Wes, I think it's going to be fascinating to see how the Steelers divvy up their targets this year, because some of it's not going to be game plan. It's just going to be purely, hey, I'm an NFL quarterback trying to make my way, whether I'm Mitch Trubisky or Kenny Pickett or Mason Rudolph, and I can't access this thing, and I need to get into this thing.
Right.
I could totally see them saying, hey, you know what? We're just going to identify who we need to identify with at the receiver position. And that's, again, why I'm with you on Deontay Johnson, especially. His separation is going to make him a target. but I'm just not so sure how the entire wide receiver position plays out, not just at the top, but also at the bottom.
Yeah, and not that he plays wide receiver, but Pat Freiermuth obviously factors into this.
He absolutely does, especially in the red zone.
How dangerous is he in the pass game, and particularly in the red zone, and what does that mean for their wide receiver usage? I also wonder too, Chris, as we talk this out, and I think we believe that the Steelers have 7 capable wide receivers. I wonder too if there's a point where there's a team that gets some injuries in training camp or the preseason, something happens. Maybe this team feels like we've got 3 running backs that we like. We'd be comfortable in parting with one of them, and hey, we got this wide receiver that we think is good, but he just don't have room for him. You've got this running back that you think is good, but you don't have room for him. Let's swap. Hey, Myles Boykin, we're really high on this guy, but he just we did the competition thing, and we just don't have a spot for him. But you've got this depth edge rusher that you don't need that we could really use behind Alex Highsmith and T.J. Watt. I wonder if that ends up being a scenario as well, too. I don't think it's a bad problem, but you know what? You're right. Long gone are the days of praying for Sammy Coates to get some stickum, for him to be like the kid in Little Giants who like puts the stickum on his hands and claps them together in the huddle, and then they're stuck to his chest. Sammy, have you seen Little Giants?
He has to see the toilet paper to catch the football.
Are you familiar with Ed O'Neill's work? Little Giants, yeah, all right. I don't think that's going to be a problem this year because I do think they'll have 7 capable wide receivers. We're off the rails late here in the evening.
We are. Before we go, if you're a fan of Little Giants, 1 means you probably grew up in the 90s. 2,
Yep.
If you haven't seen it, get on it. Just find it on Amazon. Watch it. It's a hilarious little kid. It's like Mighty Ducks
don't play with girls.
Spike don't play with girls. Like, I saw a TikTok of the actress who was Becky the Icebox.
Yep.
In the movie, and I was just like, oh my goodness. And I just always remember when she takes the field and the other coach is like, whoa, what's that cheerleader doing in uniform? And the coach of the other team, who's her uncle, knows. He's like, we messed up. He said, that's no cheerleader, that's my niece Becky. She's pissed.
She's pissed. It's one of the great lines.
That's one of the greatest lines in the movie. Becky messes them up because she's the icebox. Anyways, we're goofing off too much here at the end of the podcast here.
It's a great movie. If you haven't seen Little Giants, shame on you for 6 weeks and get yourself right this week.
And if you're a family person, if you just missed it and you got a family, you got kids, it's a great little kids movie. Just watch that for it.
Perfect movie for the kids.
But for the Steelers kids, look out for them George Pickens betting line. Look at me bringing it back, baby.
I'm getting on it. I'm getting on it right now. So I'm gonna go ask my wife. For $10 before we go to bed.
$10, so you can make $400 on George Pickens.
Babe, give me 8 months and I'll give you $400 back. All right, we'll split it 50-50.
Ain't no splitting it, bro. That's PS5 money. Let's go. Anyways, thanks for joining us, Wes, and here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. Wes, let people know they can find you, follow you, and get more of your work.
Yes, sir. On Twitter at Wesley Euler. As always, you guys know I host the Steelers Blitz with Arthur Moats. Well, we're live at noon on SNR, but you can get us wherever you get your podcast. Just search Steelers Blitz. Every show is uploaded in podcast form afterwards. And, of course, if you are a fellow tortured Mountaineer soul like me, ears and beers for all of your WVU listening enjoyment as well, too.
Absolutely. Do check out everything Wes Euler does. Ears and Beers, SNR. Follow the man at Wes Euler on Twitter because the man, he has great tweeting skills, I will say. He does entertain. And if you want to catch all my 13-9 jokes on Wes, that's the only other way you're going to see them. Weekly, which means you're due this week. It's coming up, so you just got to see when am I going to drop it on you.
We still listen. It's still early in the week. We still got a lot of time.
It's Monday. We both had long Mondays, but anyways, thanks again, Wes, for joining the Locked On Steelers podcast. Thank you all for listening to and watching the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter. Follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Carter Critiques. Watch this show: Apple, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Odyssey, YouTube, wherever you get your podcast. Thanks again for checking us out. We'll be back tomorrow. Tony Serino makes his triumphant return to the Locked On Steelers podcast. We'll see you then.